Welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773's Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. Can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today, and happy Martin Luther King Day to everybody out there. Keep advocating for equal rights, and don't necessarily follow leadership at the national level. Follow your own intuition, follow your own true nature. Know that we are all one human race, and that music itself is a universal language. And it's an honor to bring back a cat who did that, creating a universal language for decades. Ray Neapolitan, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Jake, good morning, and happy Martin Luther King Day.
Happy Martin Luther King Day. I was just wondering if you could step back and think about some of the music that you might have played, not necessarily like in a radical fashion, but more that was a protest might be the wrong word too, but it was music that was intended to express your angst, or the band's angst, as it related to injustice, especially during the late 60s. I just feel like the biggest missing component to a lot of the social justice causes today, there's just no music attached to it. And I wasn't sure if you were ever involved with anything that, whether it was a Black Panther rally or whether it was, whatever it was just like there were cats that played music at these events. You have Black Lives Matter now, you have other things going on, but what's lacking is the vitality of the music.
Well, during that time period, we were all aware of what was going on. But in the musician community that I was involved with, there was no discrimination. There were no barriers. I don't recall ever playing an event or playing in bands that had a lot of social comment to them. It was just all about the music, and at that time, we looked up to the Black musicians. They were always a part of us.
Right.
Right. Especially in growing up in Chicago, that was those were my idols. And we never held that kind of fear or
prejudice.
Prejudice or any of that in our neighborhoods, our families, in our schools in that area. I mean, there was a lot going on, but not it never seemed in my particular Italian black Jewish neighborhoods.
Right.
You know,
They were all, I mean, part of it
they
was...
were just part of us.
Right. Well, I mean, you guys were all, it was all those, I remember talking to the late, great Tommy LaPuma, and rest in peace, and in Cleveland, where he grew up, it was, I mean, or in Buffalo, Don Menza, it was the Italians, and the neighborhoods were all mixed with blacks and Jews. It was the, part of it's just how we, from a humanistic point, you guys were just much closer from a humanistic point of view. You were interacting on the bandstand. You were seeing each other all the time. There might have been cases of very overt prejudice or racist. I mean, I know like Cal Jader, and this is kind of going maybe 5 or 8 years before you started your professional career, maybe. But I mean, he used to like have to fight with promoters or club owners to make sure that Mongo and Willie Bobo got the same pay that he was getting. You know, like there was
Right.
this sort of like this. There was a lot. I just was there a definitive time where you sort of, or I remember talking to the great drummer Lee Charlton, and he was in Ellis Marsalis's band, and when they went through Texas, they had to drive Ellis to the black side of town. He couldn't stay with them in the white side of town.
Well, true. I mean, this must be
50s, mid to late 50s, or in that.
Yeah, late 50s
Yeah.
that I'm thinking of. The only experience I had with that is for a small period of time, Bill Goodwin and I, we had worked with the Treniers, which was a totally black Chitlin Circuit.
Oh my! This is unbelievable. How do you spell this band? How do you spell the name of this band?
Treniers were Triniers, and they were brothers. He Cliff, and he Claude, as they would say. You know, but the ones, and this was like a, what can I say? It was sort of like a Louis Prima kind of, that kind of vibe.
Absolutely, dude. Big horns, orange, like rock, kind of, yeah. Were there racy lyrics too?
Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, they were. So anyway, we traveled with one of the Treniers extensively. Milt Trenier, one of the nephews. It was like a big family thing.
Yeah.
And we came to that experience as we traveled through the South with Milt, and where at that time, 59, 58, I think it was, there were separate bathrooms, and we did have to go in and get sandwiches at certain places for everybody, me and Bill. But I hadn't seen that. But when we would play in the South or so forth with an all-black audience, they accepted Bill and I, and in fact, sometimes Danny Long, the piano player, was with us as well.
Wow.
And it was like a white trio behind this black band, and we've never felt any discrimination. In fact, it was just so wonderful. We would stay at people's houses, in certain places, and just never experienced that. Even earlier in Chicago, I do remember when there were two different musician unions, whether it was the South Side Union and then the North, or sort of the city center or the North Side unions. And that was just sort of falling apart as I came up. But no, I don't recall any real.
Because Budemer, the cat, you probably were in the studio with Dennis Budemer, a legendary character.
Dennis, sure.
I love the cat, and did an interview with him a couple years ago, and we're primed for another one. But he was with Chico Hamilton off the bat, and there were times where they'd be going across the country, and Dennis is like, "Chico, I'm starving, man. I need something to eat." And Chico's like, "We can't stop in this town." So you're saying that in these towns, you would go in and grab sandwiches. The White Cats would go in and grab sandwiches for everybody in the band. But there were just certain towns you could not. And then I remember Mike.
Right, as you're going through.
Right.
as you were traveling through the day, that's what would happen. But in the areas where we would play, whether it was outside Atlanta or even further down south somewhere, when you were in the community, it was just wonderful. In the black community. I mean, that's where it was happening.
But so this is so. First of all, Danny Long traveled out to L.A. too. I didn't realize he went to L.A. Is that when you met up with Goodwin?
Well, that's how I came to L.A. is with Danny and a drummer called John Whited.
Whited. Any relation to? Did he have a brother at all, Dennis Whited, or no?
He did. Yeah.
Is that Dennis's brother? Oh my God.
I believe so. Yeah. And we met John in Chicago because he was playing with Pat Moran, with Scotty LaFaro.
Oh my God.
At that time.
Unbelievable. It was just such a small world at that time.
Exactly. You knew everybody. So we, as we mentioned earlier, we were sort of one of the big trios on Rush Street, in Chicago. And we got our break to come to California to open up a club called PJ's. Wow. Right on Santa Monica and Crescent Heights. And that's how I came to California for the first time. And we stayed for about almost a year playing at PJ's. And then we went back to Chicago. And then while I was out here, I had made friends with Ralph Pena and all that group who I studied with and so forth. And it was Ralph that got me back to L.A., because I just said, boy, it's either New York or L.A., and I sure love L.A. I had been communicating with Ralph, and he said, come on out. There's an apartment right next door to me. I'll hold it for you if you're coming out. And that's what happened. And I lived next to Ralph for a good 5 years. And he had a garage that made into a little playing area where he would have all the guys there all the time playing. And I would sit there and sit in, and I learned so much at that time. But that's how I got to L.A., and then I stayed in L.A., and Danny went back to Chicago.
I was going to say, because, there was a lot of, you must have been doing a lot of the Afro-Cuban stuff with Pena out there.
Well, yeah, Ralph was definitely into that, and he helped me get into I would sub for him. He did a lot of studio work at the time, and as you know how busy it was, where you had three or more sessions, a 10, a 1, a 4, where they would overlap. And when Ralph thought I was ready enough, he would send me in to cover for him, which you could do in those days. Play the first few cues and then I'll be there, or just make the rehearsal and I'll be there when the red light goes on. So that's how all that started. It was pretty relaxed, and that's how things started. For a lot of guys like me.
So and then at that point you ran into Goodwin at a certain point and
yes,
and
right,
hit the road.
Well, I had one exactly. I was going back and forth. I had, various, just trying to get anything we could to stay in L.A. and make a living. And that's when, I met Joanne Grauer at that time. Everybody was around at that time.
I need to ask you, because I want to go deep into this Joanne Grauer character, because this woman, some of the stuff that you were playing on with her is out of control, and it's a little bit like later than the period we're talking about right now. But just to put a bow on this cultural bias thing, a lot of people get up in arms about comments that our current president makes, and as offensive as they are, and coming from the quote unquote office that he holds, makes it very offensive to the world and stuff. But I guess what I've been trying to, even though I'm just a naive Jewish 39-year-old cat from Long Island, to me it's like, hey, you know what? I mean, the sad reality is that, and someone like you who's sort of seen it in light and dark and seen it all over to a degree, it's just really what 3 out of every 10 people in this country feel. And that's just the kind of, or that's how they talk, you know? I mean, it's really the people that,
sadly enough,
you know, and I wonder, you know, do you know, being that you lived through it, I know you're not a sociology guy, or, you know, you're not like steeped in that, but have we made any progress since the civil rights movement, do you think, or are we stuck in a
well, I do think we've made progress, you know. On the other hand, all the progress that, well, we did elect a black president. We re-elected Obama. Everything was looking, you know, much rosier as far as race relations and so forth. But that underneath, as you know, as we still see, that 30-some% still trying to hold on to, you know, some sort of white America from, you know,
the 50s, right? The 40s and 50s. It's just, it's really. Do you see it? Do you think it'll have an impact on the generations that come up underneath? You know, people that are kids that are living in these communities that still have this cultural bias, that speak the way Trump does, and that feel that way, or do you think that we are just sort of have to let the dead wood die off and move on? I mean,
die up. Well, I think the millennials, you know, have no. What can I say? I think they understand it much better than we had, and they're not holding those prejudices. You know, it seems maybe even in the Deep South, you know, I mean, it's changing. It's slow. It's very slow, but there is progress, you know.
Yeah, I just, you know, I wonder. Yeah, it's a deep subject. It's just like you guys really. I also wonder economically if, I mean, I look at millennials now. I mean, they're probably the most challenged generation economically in this country, and I think one reason that, I don't know, I just look at a lack of leadership, and I really look at a lack of the significance of music in our communities and what it used to mean. And, you know, when you got out, I mean, you really, I applaud you for bouncing because it just, the music was I said it at the top, it's a universal language, and it brings all people together. And if you don't have that on a consistent basis every night, and you have, you know, the ability for people to make a living on that, and you have a vibrancy and sort of a culture within. That's the other part of it also, is that like a lot of towns like San Francisco, I'm not totally sure about LA, but San Francisco, for instance, now there's nobody living in San Francisco that was born and raised in San Francisco. You know, you have a lot of European money, you have a lot of
So true.
You know, it's like you have younger cats who have no understanding of where they, you know, this is a whole new group of people, and they're not even American, really. I mean, they're and that's cool, but they don't have any understanding of the lineage of how that actual scene came to be. So and it's the same thing in New York. You got Chinese people buying up, you know, apartments with cash. So when you remove that culture, and that's the scariest part, is when you start to push people, when you make it unaffordable, and you bring in, you know, people that can only, let's say, afford it. When you forget your history, well, then you're doomed to repeat it, you know. And when you don't have that kind of understanding,
exactly.
You know, and that's very clear to me right now. So the millennials being sort of pulverized in this bad economic time, while they might be more aware of and more tolerant, and I agree with you on that front, if they can't get ahead, then this underbelly is going to continue to drag us down because they have a lot of money. this 30 something percent of people, and quite frankly, it's a little bit higher than that because there's a lot of people like that are saying, "Hey, I don't like it, but you know what? It's not affecting me, so I'm just going to keep my head down and move on." So it's more than that.
True. It's as you say in San Francisco, it's the same here. There's very few people that grew up in Los Angeles, or born in Los Angeles at this point. And less and less as time goes by. Everyone is from somewhere else, and you could see how the house prices have escalated here. Where when I came here, you could buy a great house for $30,000. I mean, literally.
Yeah.
In the mid '60s, and now you can't find a house in an area that you want to live in for less than $1.4 million or something. And I mean, the same house that in the '60s would be maybe $60,000.
Was there?
So,
yeah. No. I mean,
a lot of people,
yeah. Go ahead. Continue.
But a lot of people just can't afford this now, and everything else has escalated with taxes and food prices and transportation and so forth. So you're right. If those people still, have that blanket thrown on them, sooner or later they're going to, the old stuff will come back again.
Yeah, I mean, and ultimately I remember talking to Dave Getz from Big Brother and living up in San Francisco, they had a, like these rent-controlled areas for artists. It was like, they might live above a laundromat, but that's where he met Peter Albin, and that's where Big Brother kind of got started. And they were just, the point is that the culture and the arts was able to be sustained. Now you just have these huge multi-million-dollar venues being put up for people with money to come and sort of stare at people and watch an event. There are no artists within the actual urban centers anymore. They can't afford to live there. People in Oakland, you're getting .com people making tons of money who can put down 6 months of rent in advance, and they're pushing out all that culture. And so it's just, it's as we sit here on Martin Luther King Day, I think he'd be proud of the fact that we are talking about issues that affect, and that's the whole point, is that, Ray, it's like global warming. I mean, you can sit there and stick your head in the sand, or you can realize that there are like huge chunks of ice that are going to cause major problems for shipping through the, it's like it's happening. And what's happening in America is that we're less white and more brown now. And it's only going to get more. I mean, my wife is Taiwanese, so our kids are perfect. We have total multicultural family, but that's, we are becoming a different looking country. And so you see this adherence to, trying to hang on to these these sort of, and it's an anguish kind of.
There in the urban centers, is one thing, but as you get into the country, it's if you drive through the Midwest again, you go, oh my God, there's a lot more going on here than socially and culturally than in LA, or the lack of it, I should say.
Well, I mean, maybe because it's more affordable. Do you think? I mean, well, that's an interesting. I've never heard. That's interesting. You say that.
Well, it just seems there's more pockets of just more white people, and it seems like they're less integrated in those areas.
No, you're talking about in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It definitely less integration. And then I think in some, yeah. And I just think that also the biggest thing that I see is just this trending. I mean, I don't know how it would manifest, but the fact that we already have private for-profit prisons and a justice system that unfortunately, is not very fair to people of color. That, you know, I don't know. As long as we have a mentality that it's better to throw people in prisons than to rehabilitate, you know, I mean, it's sending, you know, it's a whole bunch of problems.
Well, it's the wrong message.
It sends the wrong. Yeah, I mean,
like Trump was trying to get, you know, an army, you know, together. Let me see. I'm losing my thought now, but.
No. Let me help you out. Let me help you out. Let me just make it very clear. At his inauguration, he requested tanks at his inauguration. Tanks. And the military's like, that's not what a democratic country does. The democracies don't have tanks to show military might at an inauguration. We're on the precipice of something incredibly unknown and dangerous at this time.
I do believe that. And this next year is going to be very interesting to see how this all comes around.
Well, we just have to hope that we can get to one piece in November. I do think that there's an awareness now, an understanding that a lot of people may not have liked Hillary and never thought Trump would win, so they stayed home. And I just think you're going to see that's the last great hope, is the people's ability to pursue their power to vote. I mean, vote. I mean, go vote, you know?
The other thing that made me change a lot of my thinking is being in Europe for so long, you know, with Joe Cocker. You know, we were, you know, all over in the East, in Russia, you know, in Poland, just every country you can think of, Finland, you know, Romania. When you see their cultures and the way their ideas, they think we're just foolish. You know, they just think we're just crazy of our attitudes about race and so forth in a lot of the areas, like, or in France. Look at all, you know, I mean, that's why all the jazz musicians went to Europe, you know, in Sweden and France in those early times.
You're absolutely right. John, I mean, really, it was just, I mean, when did it start? Kenny Clark? I mean, then it went Johnny Griffin, and I mean, it goes on, Dexter Gordon, and it was just like, you know, they were fed up with they had to deal with it. Like, for you were immersed in the music, just trying to survive on the bandstand, having a ball. You were also white-skinned, so there was all these other things.
Exactly.
You know, there's all these other things, you know, and so these guys got fed up with it, and now we have, like, I also think, like, you know, the French, the British, clearly were not proud of their history in this country, and we ultimately, you know, we fought the Revolutionary War, and then ultimately, you know, we seem to just lay back on this whole thing, like, hey, you know, if not for us, then Hitler would have controlled all of Europe. Therefore, Europe is, you know, inferior to us, and their beliefs are petty. They're not petty. They're not strong. I mean, tolerance and diversity and the arts, and like you said, they look at us askew, and we look at it and say, you know, we saved your ass, and that's all that matters, and we're going to continue being this sort of. I mean, we're really at a point where it's like, I mean, it's really almost a banana republic already, and we're almost falling into what potentially could be a police state, because there's just a lot of complicity in this, and we don't. The leaders like Malcolm X, Dr. King, the Kennedys, and I know we're going back, but it's just, you know, Obama couldn't do it himself. He's just one cat. I mean, you need to have, like, you know, a dozen, 15, 20 peeps out there who are fighting the fight, and so we'll see how it evolves. I really hope we can avoid a world war before November, and that a lot of innocent people won't get hurt. But I think that's Ray and I riffing on the current state of the world right now. When did you first connect with Karen Krog, by the way?
Wow. I have heard that name so long.
The woman's a
Yeah,
badass.
where do you find this?
You know, Ray, you just leave it to me.
Yeah,
I mean,
well-
Ray, I'm going to stretch your brain all over the place, man. I've been in the
Oh,
sewers. I mean, I remember Herb Bushler, the bass player, was like 4 years ago. He's like, dude, you've been in the sewers for years. I mean, really, I've just been finding these nuggets. I mean, there's a lot of it doesn't lead anywhere, but some of it's gold, man. You know.
Yeah. Well, thanks for reminding me. I'm just trying to put it together now. But I think it was through Don Ellis that, if I'm not mistaken.
Everything runs through Don, man.
You know, at that time period, yeah, because he was searching for different people, different styles, different music. You know, just searching, and he, in turn, turned us all on to a lot of this. You know, at that time, we were young and impressionable, and there we were, man. But Karen, yeah, I got to start digging into that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just there's an album here that I've seen before, The Many Faces of Karen Krog. It was re-released in 2017 on vinyl. Neapolitan is all over this album. It's a little bit too high for me to buy right now, but I mean, because she was like, there was this whole incredible I don't want to say avant-garde. There was a post-bop movement in Europe with Heisman and you know, these crazy cats out there. Krog was one of them. I mean, did you actually?
Yeah.
You wound up playing on the bandstand with her?
I think it was just in the studio. I mean, you really got me here.
I'm just gonna. I mean, we have just reading off some of. Jesus, Dave Frischberg's on this album. I'm playing piano. Alan Estes, our boys, on drums. Kenny Drew plays piano. Frank De La Rosa plays bass. I mean, this is a huge session.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like, you know, I mean, wow. There's some European cats on here. And Red, did you get a chance to hang with Red Mitchell out in LA at all?
I did. You know, in fact, I was going to send you a picture of Red and I.
I love it.
Session together. I didn't do that.
No, it's all right. We got plenty. This is only part 2, man. Wait, no, but what was it? What was?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I was
Go ahead.
just fascinated about Red. You know, he was, outside of it just being a wonderful player and just an intense person. You know, that time period when he just picked up and left the country and just set up tuning his bass in fifths and came back and
wait, can you talk about? I'm not familiar with this. Can you talk about this journey he went on?
Well, I know.
You're like, I'm just out of my range again.
God Almighty, man, you got me going.
Stretching you out, man.
There was one period of time, I think this had to be in that same, you know, between late 60s and 74 or something. And Red was doing, you know, all kinds of studio work and a lot of live playing and so forth, but he just hit a brick wall, as far as I could tell, and I think he went to Sweden, if I'm not mistaken. And he stopped playing for a while, I think the story goes, and then he restrung his bass and worked out this system. So he tuned it as a cello.
Wow. This is mind-blowing.
And he had all new fingerings. I mean, he had all this going on. And, yeah, I mean, what can I say?
It says Mitchell moved to Stockholm in '68. He won a Swedish Grammy Award.
There you go.
Yeah. So, and during that period, he recorded with Clark Terry, Lee Konitz, Herb Ellis, Jim Hall, Joe Pass, and a whole bunch of. So, but I guess he had to leave this country in order to course correct on his entire framework.
That's right. Yeah. Reboot. Yeah.
Reboot. Unbelievable.
So, you know, I mean, It's a great story, and in fact, now I'm writing down some things that you're telling me.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. No, because this is. I mean, we're going so into the deep. We're going into the sewers here, Neapolitan. I mean, this is just. I mean, this we're just getting going. But did you? This is the other thing. You know, John McLaughlin grew up in coffee houses with the lyricist for Cream. He was the guy. The guy's name. I forget the guy's name. The lyricist. But the point is that the guy would be singing or doing poetry over music. And did you do anything along those? I mean, outside of the singer-songwriter,
there was a lot of that.
Were there poets you worked with? Could you talk a little bit about that? Like, especially on the Sunset Strip. I remember, like, when I interviewed David Crosby, he was talking about Ginsberg showing up with his partner, and they were eating acid and they were dancing all night. And I mean, that was more like electric psychedelic rock. But did you have a gig with a poet, or was there poetry intermixed with the jazz at that time?
There was. Absolutely, and I do recall. I don't recall who the poets were or who the speakers were, but there was a lot of that. Just the written word over a trio, or a quartet with the tenors, or tenor and trumpet, and we would play, and then they would recite, and we would either play under them, or the other way that it used to go down was they would do their reading, and we would just play.
Right.
There was no, we're not going to play this song or that song. We would just play.
I mean, how did you just play what you how would you do that?
Well, there would be a tone center. Someone would start, and then the drummer would come up with a feel, and then all of a sudden we had this, and then you start hearing where the changes were going. And this was before any real modal kind of thing was happening. So we would do our best, and sometimes it was elevating, and sometimes it was okay. I don't know.
Were you listening? Yeah, were you listening to the, like, when you were just playing? Yeah. Go ahead.
You would be listening to the speaker or the poet, doing his reading, and try to play what he was trying to express.
I love it. Because you could fall on your face, and it could also be a completely transcendent experience for people in the audience, because it was so weird. Right. It was weird. It was just cool.
No,
I mean, there was could you talk about, if anything, the Cat, because there's this one album, this is before you moved to L.A., but the Alan Ferguson. Did you know Alan?
Wow, why does that sound so familiar?
Of course, no. He was a huge conductor, classical, but also weaved into jazz. His son was his son was a great guitar player too, but Alan was his father. It's a badass, and he had this album that came out. Is called Alan Ferguson with Kenneth Patchen on the with the Chamber Jazz Sextet, and it says this is what it was in 1958. And this is the write-up. It happened in an offbeat bistro. Kenneth Patchen read his poems. The Chamber Jazz Sextet underscored his voice. It wasn't background music, but a weird cacophony. And the sounds supported each other and cuts clean through the smog and smoke and talk and tinkle. Archie Shepp was there. He caught the strange electricity. So I'm just saying it was just this intermersing of, because a lot of people will, there's a lot of people that give credit to a lot of the beat poets for writing about bebop and popularizing, whether you like that word or not, they popularized that form of music by writing about it in their poetry.
Well, this sounds more like Chicago at that time.
It sounds more like New York, actually, too, I think.
I recall at that time period, around 58, there was these sessions on Monday night at a club called the Gate of Horn.
Oh, yeah.
Joe Siegel.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where, and I was just starting them. I had big eyes and just listening to the guys play. And, and they always had the best, the biggest and best, local jazz musicians. And, Johnny Griffin was there all the time, Joe Daly, Ira Sullivan, those kind of guys. And that's when I remember sitting in the audience, and then a poet would come up, and it would just be elevating. I mean, it was wonderful.
Talking to
but
Ray,
that sort of diminished as time went on, and it got into another thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I want to play this piece of music for you because I couldn't stop listening to. My daughters and I were dancing to it last night. This is we have a game on this program called Name That Tune. So let's see how you do with this one, and we'll come back and talk about it. All right?
All right, Jake.
Here we go. Going deep into the well of music here on the Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome back. I know that was just a jam. You have any idea? It was just a trio. It was just drummer Neapolitan on electric bass and then a pianist. You want to give a guess of what that might be?
No, I think that was Joanne Grauer. Was it
don't sell yourself short. You're right on the money. Joanne Grauer. The name.
Frog Child.
You know it, man. I just got hip to that tune. Let me tell you something, Neapolitan. Do you know that album on vinyl is worth? It goes for $350 minimum, $350.
Yeah, I got a few at the house.
I might need to grab one, dude. I mean this is
wow.
This is
that's something. Now, who was it?
Yeah, exactly.
Was it Jim Gordon?
No, see, this is what I want to talk to you about. No, this is because I listened back in preparation for part 2. I listened back to part 1, and because we were so I couldn't even really get my head together. We were all over the place, but you blew my mind when you were talking about this trio work with Gordon on drums. This cat is another guy who I haven't gotten to yet. I've been friends with him for a long time. Steve Schaefer was on drums.
Steve, all right.
All right, and let me tell you something. Joanne, and I have not. I'm telling you right now, When you mentioned her last night in that first interview, when I listened back, I was not aware of who she was. Blew my mind. And you talked about, I mean, she's playing Chick Corea Return to Forever style. You guys are playing Chick Return to Forever style stuff on this. I mean, it's filthy. But yet, what is you, even though you heard it through the phone, I mean, you were playing all over the bass. When you're in a rhythm section like that, just talking to younger cats out there, if you don't do it well, like a tune like that, it's going to sound like a mess. If you do it really good, it's going to turn into a funky, jamming tune that probably is the reason why it's worth $400 because everybody's sampling that tune now. But as a rhythm section, how do you keep it together with something that frenetic, but something that melodic and beautiful?
Well, first of all, Joanne, I mean, it was, I can't tell you, at that time, she was playing. I mean, there was no one like her, and being a female, and young and beautiful, and the whole thing was
I need to know when did you first find, where did she come from? Because this woman was not on my radar. And this is from 74, but your history with her goes way back before that.
I'm afraid so.
No, don't be afraid. This is what it's about, man. So because this is
I was, I think first it was about 66, I think.
66.
She was local, California. She grew up in California. And she was, what can I say? I mean, there was no one like her. I mean, outside of, this is even Bill Evans-ish before, some of her ballads and her harmonic sense and her feel. It was just, I was just drawn to her, because I learned so much at that time. And just playing with her and her writing and so forth was just outstanding. And we, were together for quite a long time there. We did a lot of work together, when we're thinking about it now. I mean, we did hair together,
really? Was that
yeah, she was on that pit. She was in the pit.
She was in the pit.
At the Aquarius Theater.
Oh my God, dear God!
And I would sub there, and she would work with singers, and she would, it was hard for her as a woman, at that time. A lot of people were intimidated by her.
Absolutely.
Or whatever the reasons were, but for a lot of us here in LA, I mean, she was amazing. We recorded so much. I don't know where any of this stuff is now.
Well, you cannot get away that easily because I was up for hours last night looking for this Neapolitan, this nexus of Joanne Grauer, Neapolitan, Jim Gordon, and what I came up with.
I don't know if any.
Yeah.
I don't recall if anything was ever, outside of just doing it, and who knows where, those quarter-inch tapes were.
I mean, you're saying you hit the record button and it got recorded, but it wasn't for a specific session, for instance.
No, it wasn't like for a deal or on a record or anything. We would record. Joanne would record, with various groups. Every once in a while we would either save enough money or someone would say, okay, you got 3-4 hours of studio time, and we would knock, because we'd be playing all the time, we would knock off 4 or 5 songs, and then who knows what would happen with them, as far as
because
going further up the ladder.
Well, no, I mean, obviously, but so she was really on the scene in the haven of West Coast bop in the 50s, because there's a trio album she did with Buddy Clark on bass and Mel Lewis on drums. And this is from the 50s. I mean, she was incredibly progressive. I mean, I just this self-titled album that she did in '74 is just the one that we played with Frog Child was just mind blowing. But if
I could,
yeah,
if I could find any of that, I'll definitely send it to you.
Well, no, I mean, listen, if you have multiple, to me, I'll never find this album. It literally, I was looking at the prices. It goes for a cool $400 in good condition. I mean, it's on. You can't. It was on this.
That's unbelievable.
Well, but it was on this this Avar label, AVAR. I mean, it was just really bizarre. And Schaefer, you guys were locked in on that, man. I mean, how many times?
Yeah, still.
What was it like also to know that you were going into sessions a lot of times, especially with Kat, you were, that where you knew that you were going to have maybe just like one take or two takes to cut a tune. What was the mindset you would, like, you weren't going to spend 45 minutes doing, people have their own studios today. You go, you're just going over and over and over, retaking this. You guys didn't have a chance to do that. And so, I mean, what was the, in some ways, I mean, obviously there was.
You were prepared. We had maybe a rehearsal the day before, and then with the limited studio time and finances, we would first rehearse with the red light on, and then the second would be the take, and then it would be next song. And it was just like that. We didn't think about it. We didn't do overdubs. There was none of that. You just did a couple takes and then we would do the next song.
You have obviously heard Frog Child many times. You knew, I'm upset. I can't stop listening.
I heard that just a while back, and that's what reminded me. I hadn't heard it like literally for 30 years or something. I don't know what it was that someone brought it to my attention just a couple months ago.
It's just
went,
burning.
Wow,
it's just burning, man. Can you explain can you talk about your experiences working with Jim Morrison and how that even happened?
Well, yeah. It's funny you bring that up next because that's just a total opposite.
Well, of course, we're going zigzag everywhere, dude. We're zigzagging.
As far as, it started off, I was called in for a session with John Sebastian, with Paul Rothchild producing.
Right.
And this was the John B record. This John's first record after The Spoonful.
I'm looking at it right here. Yeah, 1970.
And I played a couple tracks on string bass and so forth. So I don't know if all of them were on there, but we hit it off fabulously, John and I, and Paul. Is it Paul that produced that?
Yeah, I'm looking. Let me see who's the producer on this. Paul Rothchild producing.
Yeah, so that was my entrance into. Let me preface that. Before that, I was working with Peter Galloway and with the Ohio Knox band.
Dude, where is Ohio Knox? I had that album for a minute, and I never really dreamed I'd ever. Yeah, I mean Ohio Knox. But I never thought I'd ever get to you, so I actually got rid of the album. I mean, that album's killer. But you're talking about getting into the psychedelic folk rock scene. Let's go back to Ohio Knox. That was your introduction to this.
Okay, yeah, that was really almost the first. That was, going for a record deal. We had a record deal. Our manager was Bob Cavallo, and we recorded that Ohio Knox record with Paul Harris. Keyboard.
Oh my, Paul Harris.
Dallas Taylor.
Oh my.
And Dallas Taylor was the drummer. So there was this on Barham Boulevard at that time. There was a road that went up into the hills, and deep into the hills was this community of just rockers, just hippies, that they had tents and houses. There was a studio there, and John was living there. In fact, I think remember Cyrus Faryar, I believe.
Right. Well,
He
no, I mean,
was
you're talking about you're talking about Topanga Canyon right now, or no? Is this something different?
No. This is the Barham Boulevard goes up.
How do you spell? How do you
from
spell bar?
Ventura.
How do you spell this? This is incredible. How do you spell bar?
B-A-R-H-A-A.
And there was an enclave of artists that were living there and hanging out.
Right. There were a lot of people were there. There was an 8-track studio, which we did that record on. And people were just hanging, living in tent. John had a teepee, he was living in.
Oh, I love it. I got to send you my interview with Sebastian. You're going to love that interview.
The women would cook, I mean, it was like a kibbutz.
Everybody knew their roles.
But anyway,
yeah, no, I mean it was very. But I mean the music. So I mean, were you, for instance, like when you got into the Sebastian thing, would you rehearse over there, or that was just a separate community?
No, we would rehearse. We would hang out.
Exactly. That's why the music felt so good, man. Because everything was cooking, man. Everything was on fire. Unbelievable.
Yeah. So we did that record. And there's a lot of stories that go with that, but we moved on. Then from that record, and Peter, I mean, everything is sort of connected. Leads to the next thing. Came from New York, and he was with this band called the Fifth Avenue Band.
Oh man!
At the time, which was and John Lynn was in that band.
Oh man!
And anyway, so all those people were friends with Sebastian because they were sort of, doing the same clubs. And so Sebastian heard me with them, and then that's how I was on that session with the John B. And then from that, eventually I went on the road with John. We formed our own band, and but that led me to Paul Rothchild, which led me. Paul called me to do the Morrison Hotel record. So
was the band? Hold on. Was the band with Sebastian with a trap set, or was it just like acoustic, a band that you were in?
With the band we had was a regular, just bass, guitar, drums, and then John playing guitar and harp and harpsichord, whatever that.
Wow. And you were on because I know he was on the Chitlin Circuit for a while, but that might have been before you guys linked up. You guys were doing tours around the country.
Yeah, we would do colleges and small clubs, and what we did, we moved to Woodstock at the time.
You did?
And correct.
Where have you not been? I mean, where you were part of the Woodstock scene? You played the Joyous Lake up there?
Well,
I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah, we were up there, and John rented Bob Dylan's house.
Right.
Bob was gone.
Right.
And we stayed, the whole band. Ronnie Koss was a guitar player from Detroit, and Kelly Shanahan was the drummer from L.A. And we lived there and just went out weekends or, whenever we would work. And we would go down, do colleges, like, go down to Georgia State, go down all through the whole college circuit there. So we stayed there, through the height of it when everyone was up there with Janice, the Full Tilt, Bloomfield, all the studios were going, the city was, the town was just bopping at that time. It was just, and also with us was Valerie Carter, John Lynn, with the small, with Howdy Moo, that band. They would open for us with Sebastian.
Wow.
So we stayed, I was there for a while. We just used that as home base for almost a year, it seems, I believe. And so anyway, back to the Doors.
Well, no, I mean, this is actually, I never thought it would lead into this, but I mean, that, like, were you engaging with like Butterfield and the band?
Minimally at that time. It always seems like it was the dead of winter. You know?
Yeah, no, that it was always the dead.
There,
I mean,
it was
dude,
like 6 feet of snow, and
yeah,
and everybody was just curdled up in their heavy clothes and by the fire or something.
right. It's always the winter. Always the winter.
Yeah, I mean, we would, I wish at this point we had gone out and hung out, but we were sort of unto ourselves at that time. We were rehearsing. John was writing. We were traveling at the same time, and other people were in and out. Everybody was doing that in the town, So I remember we had to trudge down the hill and go have breakfast at a place called Beanie's. Where everybody would go every morning around 10 o'clock or 11 and, go have their eggs and
coffee. Yeah. Wait, what was the name of the place? What was it called?
Deanie's.
How do you?
I don't know how it was. Deenies.
Deanie's.
It was.
So here's the thing. This will segue nicely. Did you get a chance at that time to go and see? Would you go to the Whiskey A Go-Go in New York? Did you get to see the Doors play without a bass player? I mean, from when I interviewed Densmore, he just said that.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Well, I did, and I did travel with them to New York, and as they played, I don't remember which show it was at the time, just to rehearse with them. We would rehearse, so they took me with them. But I didn't play live with them. Otherwise, what I was saying, it's such the opposite as what we were just speaking of,
right.
Because we'd be in the studio. I mean, we were in the studio for a year doing that record, and that was like 3 nights or 3 days a week, sometimes more. And we would go over and over and over the material, which was for me simple material.
Very, very simple. I mean, this was folk rock at its finest.
And for me at the time, used to rehearse one, red light, second take, the next. After a while, I just started drifting. After take 70, on a 12-bar song, you start going, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, I gotta get in a different headspace now, man.
But on the other hand, when you locked in with those guys, as simple as it was, there was some magic there. There was just something that excited me, that I didn't have earlier with those other, where I came from.
Really? What could you possibly explain? I would love you. I know what you're getting at, but what do you was there a magical element? I mean, you have to go a little bit deeper on what.
There was a magic.
Yeah.
There was a magical element, and it got me to a place where I almost denounced to myself jazz itself. I'm going, wait a minute, it's so intellectual. It's only for a few people that really want to give the time to participate in listening, or what it took, all the studying and preparation. Meanwhile, with the rockers, you just went in there and hit this groove, and everything just lifted off the ground, and it was so exciting, and it gave me another point of view about music. So for a long time there, I played no jazz after that.
Wow!
And as I went through, a few more bands, I mean, I had so much fun with Dallas Taylor and Paul Harris and Peter You know, it was just so
It's seriously
different.
one of the most
And
badass rhythm sections. I mean, Dallas has left us. He's gone, right? He died.
yeah, he's gone
And
now.
then,
For
like,
what a pocket. You know,
I mean, dude, because I mean, I
what a
think like Crosby. I mean, because like I mean, Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young were using him on drums after that for a long time.
exactly, yeah.
And then also
he was
Peter
that first drummer,
Peter Harris. Who was the keyboard player?
Paul Harris.
Paul Harris. Is he
Paul
still with
Harris,
us
he was
or
with
no?
Manassas, you know. Paul Harris.
Is he still with us or
He
no?
went on to play with Manassas, and he
Absolutely.
did a lot of stuff.
Wow. I mean, is he still with us, or is he still on this planet, or where is he?
I don't know. I know Paul. I talked to him a bunch of years back. He was having some problems, physical problems. I don't even know if he's around at this point.
Were you? I want to ask you something. Were you getting like per diem, and because I find it hard to believe that you would be. I mean, granted, you were really just living in the moment and having a ball, but I mean, the music wasn't exactly challenging for you. But to leave such a comfortable scene where you were an established studio musician in L.A., were you getting per diem and you were getting paid well?
Everything was. There was money all over the place.
Oh, just give me. Let's go. Money. It was everywhere, man.
It was like, the labels were giving you big chunks of money. You could record forever. You had multi-catering. Our catering bills, were insane.
Oh, this is dude, we're getting, I mean, this is right where I wanted to be, man. I would have been writing liner notes in there, dude.
And on the road, it wasn't, it was the road.
Right.
We were paid well, for that. I mean, talking like on the road with Sebastian, I was paid well, and anything you needed was there, as far as equipment or whatever you needed, and then with the Doors, after that record, I bought my first house in LA. I mean, it was just like that.
Exactly. And it's funny when I interviewed Hal Blaine, I asked him. I said, why were you cool with the idea, like, you look at the back of any Beach Boy record and, it says drums Brian Wilson or whatever, and it never gives Hal Blaine credit. He drummed for all those hits. And that Wrecking Crew essentially did not get a lot of written credits as accompanists. And I said, that didn't bother you? And he goes, we were doing so well financially. We were all moving up economically. Our families were all doing okay, that it didn't faze us that we weren't getting credits for the records we played on. This is a little bit before you, obviously.
Right.
But I'm just saying, like, it was.
But at that time, nobody got credit. I mean, you didn't get, there weren't credits on the record.
If you were lucky, maybe like on a Tommy Tedesco record, you might get a rundown of Emil, Julius Wechter, Blaine. Like, you might get occasional, but for the big acts, you were never getting the But then all of a sudden, when really right about the time you came into play, was when the accompanist started getting put on records. But the point is,
that's right.
You had a full gig with Sebastian, so you were not. And you kind of knew you could go back to L.A. and slink back into the scene because there was so much work at that time.
Yeah, I've never even thought of that. I mean, I took it as long as, as it was available or as it was fun. And so, but you're right. I did know there was L.A. I knew I could go back, and it all led to other things. And at that time, shortly after that, everything started changing in the late 70s and sort of hit its peak around 83, 85, as far as the drum machines and the home studios and the synthesizers and all that sort of really took a big hit out of this, the recorded musicians, and it changed things forever. And it was disco came in too, it was everything was happening.
Yeah, it must have been. It's so fast. So let's just. So how did the Sebastian thing wind up coming? How did it wind up getting? Was there some finality to it? Did it end well? It just got to a point where he was like, okay.
Yeah, no, it ended well. I think John took some time off or whatever was going on. I don't recall how we. I think I started to get busy again. At that time, then I started working with Phil Spector, and then I was back in L.A. and I was all that was happening at the same time. Then there was the Gong Show. Right? Everything was at the same time in 73, 74, 75. So that's when I said I'm staying in L.A. now. That's what now I'm recalling.
Right.
Because first it was Spector, and how I got to Spector was through John Sebastian, because we went to Phil Spector's house. John was thinking of having Phil produce our record, and that was a whole thing unto itself.
Yeah, well, I can.
we drive up to this gated community in Beverly Hills, or this gated house with these huge Dobermans running wild. And then Phil pops up on this balcony and starts preaching to us.
Hold on. Did you wait? Hold on, Ray. I got Ray. We are definitely, the spirits are definitely with us and listening, because you said the last thing I heard you say was Dobermans running around everywhere, and then we got this. I don't know if you heard it on your end, but I got this frenetic, almost like Morse code sounding, piercing sound in my earphones while you kept talking. So I missed that last part. There's no doubt Spector is involved with this right now.
Right. So we're there sitting in on this couch in this room with this balcony above us, and Phil comes out after we're waiting for like 20 minutes. Oh my God, what's going on?
Oh man.
And he comes and starts preaching, so to speak. I mean, he's telling us, and you John, I know, he rattled off everything John ever did, everything I ever did. He knew all about us, but he was, a little manic, and John is a mild-mannered guy. And so we got through that meeting, and John said, absolutely not. This is the wrong guy for us. But
wait, what was the original intention? Was just, well, before he knew that he was manic and insane, that it was like, well, he's a big name and he could help sell records. That's why he wanted to work with him in the first place.
Exactly. I don't know how that came about, whether it was through, a label, or Phil inquired, or it was Cavallo saying, why don't we try this? I don't recall how that went down, but yeah, that's what was going on at that time. And then I remember all of us left and just looked at each other at the car going home and said, what just happened? But anyway, so from that, shortly after, Phil gives me a call.
Wow.
Says, we're starting up doing some sessions. Dion DiMucci, we're going to do him. Well, great, do it. So that was the first of that. I was involved for a couple years with Phil. We did Dion. We did a ill-fated Cher record. Then we did the Death of a Gentleman, Leonard Cohen.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is unbelievable.
Then I get a call saying, are you available next week, Ray? So. We're doing John Lennon. I went, oh my God! This was like I couldn't believe it. Yeah, I'll be there, man.
Had you been I mean, it wouldn't have surprised me if you had crossed paths with the Beatles beforehand.
I had not.
You had not. Okay.
Not at all. No. And so that's when that happened, and that whole series with a million stories going along with that. And then after that, there was a few more records, and then I don't know how Phil moved on or whatever. There was so much turmoil during the John Lennon sessions, him with John and the government and so forth and so forth. So it was just chaos.
This is bizarre. Is there any way to wrap this into like a short? What do you mean what was going on? I mean, John was considered a radical and was being looked at by the government or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Remember that story? I'm really not clear, but
well, don't worry about it. I mean, it was before my time. It's just like I'm just like, this is
at that time he had left Yoko, and he was with May Ping. Was that her? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not I'm not into his I don't know his personal romances, but yeah,
he was with her, and he was, and then the government was on his case, and he was just unraveling. It seemed, at that point.
You're talking about John was unraveling.
Right.
Wow.
And then mainly because of Phil, because Phil was driving him nuts. And Phil was very difficult, and through all that, they were drinking a lot. They would go through a case of Cavassier at night, and Phil and John were not seeing things the same way, and there was a lot of tension through that record.
What was the so I mean, were you able to were you able to see the genius of Lennon at all during those sessions, or what was the takeaway from that?
Absolutely. I fell in love with the guy. I mean, he was just.
You talk a little bit about him. Just talk about him as a person, because he gets lost in the shuffle, and he died so tragically.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, for me, it was like he was one of the guys.
Right.
For sure. He would love the musicians. He would chat with us. Joke with us, tell stories, and he would, be a lot of fun in the studio. Rehearsing a song or something like, preparing for it. He would, just great.
No ego trip. No ego trip.
No, I didn't notice it. Not towards the band.
Right.
And it was that huge band, of course, and hard to control, and with a bunch of characters as well. And some nights it went well, sometimes not so good. But Phil would have us do all kinds of. We were at the record plant for a while. We were thrown out of the record plant, and then we went to, I forget where we went before we went to A&M, Studio A, and then we did most of it there. But yeah, there was a lot of problems for sure with that record, and. But as far as John himself, I thought he was just great. Just one of the guys. Towards all the musicians. But then he would go off, with Phil and a few, Harry Nilsson would be there all the time. He'd go off with Harry, and then I'd hear I'd see, or Keltner as well, and I see. A couple guys come back with bandages and black eyes and say, well, there was a fight in the car last night between Phil and Harry. And, it was just madness.
And you were just like, I just got to go home to my simple...
I know. We were just... it was but so much fun, in retrospect.
In retrospect, it was... it was a little bit... I don't know. It was just it's the equivalent of somebody just dumping. Someone comes up completely poor and they become very rich very quickly, and then they just blow it all quickly. I mean, it was just like this. I can't say that that anybody would have done it any differently. It was just a gluttonous time with a lot of geniuses and a lot of really down-to-earth people and a lot of very troubled geniuses too. So you had, and then this combination, also this influence of, I mean, Charlie Neville, who I've done 2 interviews. It was the Neville brother who didn't stay. He spent most of his time in New York, playing at Minton's and playing, ridiculous jazz up there. And he said, listen, cocaine was already rampant in the black community in the 60s, but it didn't really, everything, when we hear about it in our history, it didn't take hold in America, in white America, until the 70s. But cocaine was very involved. It was very much part of the black community in the 60s. I just say the changing of the drugs also from LSD and mescaline to hard cocaine really screwed things up, as far as I'm concerned, as well.
Well, they did, and that's what happened to Peter Galway at that time. He was strung out during that record, and there was a lot of problems, but thank God he recovered and is doing very well health-wise now.
Galloway,
but
I mean,
also,
go ahead.
With Phil at that time and Lennon, all his I saw was a lot of drinking. Those guys could drink. There was in the studio. There was no drugs during those sessions. Not in the studio at all that I saw.
Right.
After, I don't know what happened with those guys, but it was. There was a lot going on, and thank God there weren't all those drugs at the time. As we were recording, we would have never finished.
Well, I want you to just take a quick break. I want to put this tune, and I found it. We'll get to the Doors at some point, but this tune, I wanted to put this in for you, and it's name that tune. I want to see if you can get this one, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
All right.
Long-tailed cat sitting by the old rocking chair. He don't realize that there's danger there, but he don't care. No rock and rollin' chair gonna boogie on his day, 'cause he's swinging his tail to a low down syncopate. I'm going down to Orleans town on a Dixie holiday and give myself a humpback harmony. You may be a symphony, but I believe in song. It's got a catchy melody, so you can sing along, 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 along. Yeah. Sing along. You know, all they say you're talking about the girls that work uptown. Now I don't realize that they're danger now. No swing and tell and no rock and rollin' girl is gonna boogie on the day. Doesn't make any time on the Dixie holiday. Just Everybody sing along, along. Don't know what you sing along, along, along. Well, you gotta sing along, along. Gonna sing as oh my, my. Daddy's getting older, Daddy's gonna try, he's gotta go by. On the big sea hall, singing kissy lady. Oh my, my. Daddy's getting older, Daddy's gonna try, he's gotta go by. On the big sea hall.
We continue to go deep into the archives here with Ray Neapolitan today on a Martin Luther King Day edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. You want to give a gander of what that is?
Yeah, I remember that. That's Kenny Loggins.
I mean, I feel like you're sitting there just as an audiophile listening to everything you played on every day. I mean, you're on fire.
Well, sometimes.
That was.
But that time,
Yeah.
When I first met Kenny, I mean, he was just this kid that was living in a VW van, as I remember, down at the beach. And this was the first time I think he really recorded any of these songs, which he later made really popular with his own band, with the Loggins Messina. And it was an odd band of some studio guys and so forth. But
do you remember who? Because you were the only bass player on this. Do you remember who your drummer partner was on this?
Yeah, it was Nick Ceroli.
Okay, you're right. Ceroli was one,
and Nick Ceroli was one of the Herb Alpert's Tijuana Brass drummer.
Dude, he had and also Pete Jolly would play accordion for that too, or piano. I mean, that was most. But the other drummer on was Gene Pello, or Palo.
Gene Pello. Wow.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
I mean, Omar. I've interviewed Omar. He was on this on keyboards. Omardian, I loved so much.
Yeah.
Finley. I don't even. The Wiley. Louis Gaskell came in for this session. I mean, this was a mind-blowing session. Mary Clayton was singing.
Yeah.
But this was, I mean, that was just a studio, because, I mean, that was called Longtail Cat, but you're saying basically this was like one of those things where he wasn't big enough to be Kenny Loggins. It was just this sort of
name. He came in to sing with us, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So
that's what was happening. And this band, we would, it's Dee Barton, and he had a band, a big band.
Dee Barton, sort of, keyboard player. Wow.
It was just in a time when everybody was playing more rock than jazz, or trying to incorporate it. A mixture of both. And I don't know how this record came about, where we had this. Gator Creek never did anything after that. I mean, we played a couple of clubs around town, and that was it. But I was always impressed with Kenny. I mean, at the time, when you hear him, the opening of that track there, he's singing so well, and it's just so honest, and just he just used to knock me out.
Oh, I mean, it's just channeling like Willis Allen Ramsey and Jerry Jeff Walker, very rootsy, cool. I think that this stuff. I'm just getting hip to so much of the Neapolitan discography. I mean, this is just this holds up better than anything Loggins Messina ever did. Really, I mean, really.
And then at that time, I also lived across the road from Jimmy Messina when Jimmy and Kenny were starting to put together, the band.
Wow.
And I would see him a lot at that time. And then he went up to Santa Barbara and so forth and made a splash that's there, But yeah.
Well, no, we're into set 2, 90 minutes here with Neapolitan. We're just getting started, but I'm gonna wrap set 2. I want to ask you, how interesting is it to look back? I mean, we've talked about Sebastian. Love and Spoonful was a relatively successful band. Gator Creek with Kenny Loggins, and there's just a ton of other cats that I'm not doing justice to. But for you, so many. Is it interesting? Is it fascinating to see the part of what I've realized? One reason my show has some legs to it is because I'm going back to your generation. You guys are still alive. You're still providing testimonials. You're still telling stories. You're still talking about this stuff. In many ways, a lot of the artists you worked with came up when they were living in VW buses, living on the beach, living in teepees. Music was absolutely a huge, significant part of our culture, but it didn't become the big business that it did eventually become. One thing about your career that's so amazing is that you played on so many records with so many people before they were anybody. And then they became somebody, and then the money got out of control. Do you put, and my question is, do you think, did the musicians have a choice to avoid the greed is good thing? Or, because a lot of these cats are still doing it. I mean, they're still doing their trips today. Journey, Tower of Power, Steve Miller, they're making beaucoup bucks. And I just wonder, I say to myself, for you said, I'm out. Like, this is not what it's about. And I'm just wondering if you think that some of the onus of where we are today is on these musicians who came from humble beginnings, became very popular, became millionaires, and then sort of forgot the roots of where they came from.
Well, it's true, and money can do strange things. All of a sudden, you're barely putting food on the table, and then all of a sudden, you make $500,000 in a year or something, and you go, well, okay, it's going to last forever, and yeah, I'm going to get that big Porsche. I'm going to get, you start doing that. And what happens is, as it seems to me, is that watching your money takes more precedent than the music at the time. Like, oh, we got a tour now because we need money. We got, the next record is due, but I'm not ready, but we got to do this record. So you all of a sudden a record comes out that was pushed forward way before its time, and maybe not good. These guys like Kenny, to write those songs that he had on the Gator Creek and so forth, he had those songs for 5 years, and that he had just in that 10-year period he wrote them, and he hadn't recorded. Then all of a sudden you start recording and you use up 10, 20 songs. You can't create those 10, 20 songs in 9 months for the next record. And that would be the problem, that you had the obscurity and then learning about it and then creating the music with no outlet, and all of a sudden you have an outlet, and then they want too much from you.
Yeah, and then you have the efficiency
and the
model.
Creativity stops.
Exactly, that's the point. The efficiency model came in. Clarence McDonald said, all of a sudden it was like, this is what the music needs to sound like in order to create a crossover pop hit, radio play. There was that creativity was just stripped right out of the music. I also want to mention that that some of the music on this Gator Creek album wound up on a motion picture, Play Misty for Me by Clint Eastwood in 1971.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. It did.
Which might have been a springboard for Loggins, actually, in his own career. But it's just interesting to know so many of these guys. I don't know. It's interesting to see. And I know they weren't, there was a period of time where it was quite remarkable, where the bean counters really just were like, well, we're making money. We'll let the musicians be their crazy selves and be creative because we're making money. And then all of a sudden the bean counters got into the musical process of it and took all the soul out of it. And I guess at that point, that's probably when you packed up your bags. And wound up doing more administrative.
Well, exactly. You know, then it just the thing why I started loving playing, you know, rock and roll at that time was for the freedom and everything. And as that diminished, then for a certain period that I was really lost. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to continue doing that. And that's why, you know, I sort of stopped around 85, you know, 87, somewhere in there.
It was about the most perfect time. So I'm going to go to New York and connect with Eddie Henderson and Chris Parker and Warren Smith and do a bunch of Facebook Lives for the next week. So you know, continue on my trip. But when I get back, I really would love to do set 3 if you're up for it. I think we got a lot more to do.
Well, we're about halfway there.
I mean, we're figuring it out, man. The puzzle pieces are all coming together. I mean, it's not a linear thing.
Well,
you know?
You got me thinking, I'll tell you that.
I love it, man. I mean, and yeah, so enjoy your week off. Keep thinking, and when I get back into town, we'll do it again.
I'll be ready for you, Jake.
Much love, Ray. Have a beautiful day, and thanks for everything, man.
All right, right back at you. Though.
Later on, dude.
All right, take care.
Peace. Bye-bye. Set 2 in the books with Ray Neapolitan. Happy Martin Luther King Day to everybody out there. And like I said, we'll be on the road starting Wednesday in New York. But keep the faith. Power Talk 1210 rolls on. I'll be back in a little bit. Hang loose.